Glad you could come this evening. Continue our study in the book of Psalms. Please turn to Psalm number 34. We're still in the middle of that psalm. We didn't finish it last time. Continuing these psalms that David has written. And in particular, last time we discussed Psalm 33, which discussed how God had made the heavens and the seas and so forth, that the universe is created, and overrules in the house of the nations, the power of the nations, and sees what people do and blesses those who serve him faithfully. The 34th Psalm that we began last time compared God's treatment of the righteous to those who are evil, and it says, taste and see that the Lord is good. He delivers his people. Those who trust the Lord are blessed. And we were discussing them in the close through verse 11, where he tells us that he will teach the children the fear of the Lord. And so we're ready to discuss some specific things in verse 12 that a person must do to see good life, have good days. Okay, that's where we were at the end of class last time. Questions or comments through verse 11 of chapter 34? Let's go ahead and read chapter 34, 12 through 22. We'll read that again. Who'd like to read chapter 34, verse 12 to 22 for us, please? 34, Bill, verse 12 to 22, please.
Who is the man who desires life and loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears, and delivers them out from all their troubles. The Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and saves such as have a contrite spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them out of them all. He guards all his bones, not one of them is broken. Evil shall slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous shall be condemned. The Lord redeems the soul of his servants, and none of those who trust in him shall be condemned.
Okay, so verses 12 through 14 list some things. Then he says that a person wants to see good days, he should do these things. And so question number 9 says to discuss those characteristics and explain them, and we'll talk some passages and so on. So what's the first thing he says that in verse 13 we must do to see good days? What do you say we must do, Karen?
Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit.
Okay, so we have proper speech. Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from deceit. So we have proper speech. So what comments or discussion do you have, scriptures that talk about our tongue and our proper speech? Comments for us? Terry.
James chapter 1, verse 26, if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. And we see here that our tongue, it can deceive us if we don't control it. We deceive our hearts even, which is the basis from where all of our actions and thoughts come from.
Okay, so proper speech, proper religion requires controlling our speech, controlling our tongue, and that speech is very difficult to control, and we have a responsibility before God. Bill?
Ephesians 4:25. Therefore, putting away lying, let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another.
All right, so put away lying and speak the truth, which goes back to the point in the last part of verse 13, keep your lips from speaking guile. Don't speak those things that are deceitful or try to mislead people. Speak the truth, okay? Other scriptures or comments on keeping your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking guile? Anybody else? Frank.
Romans 16, verses 17 and 18. Now I urge you, brethren, note those who cause division and offenses contrary to the doctrine which you learned, and avoid them. For those who are such do not serve our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by smooth words and flattering speech deceive the hearts of the simple.
Okay, so sometimes the speech that's sinful is speech that leads people into error religiously. It justifies and defends that which is false religiously. Okay? All right, so the first thing he lists then is that our speech, keep our tongues from evil and our lips from speaking guile. And then verse 14, what does he describe in the first part of verse 14? What other characteristic do we need to see good days? The first part of verse 14. Depart from evil and do good. So don't do evil, rather do good. Okay, scriptures or comments on doing good, not evil? Scriptures or comments for us? Terry.
Romans 14, verse 19. I lost it. So then let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding.
Okay, so we're to pursue what it builds us up. And that involves the last part of verse 14 as well, that seeking peace and pursue it. Bill?
Psalm 37, 27. Depart from evil and do good, and dwell forevermore.
Okay, so very much the same thing. Depart from evil and do good. We'll see that in just a few chapters, chapter 37. Okay, any other scriptures, comments on avoiding evil and doing good? And I'll be Rick.
Over in Romans chapter 12, verse 18, 17 and 18, repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men.
Okay, so even if people do bad to us, we're to do good to them. The passage says, don't return evil for evil. And you notice then that he has both the requirement is both negative and positive. Depart from evil, don't do the bad, but do the good. So sometimes people think it's enough just that they don't do bad things. But that's not enough to please the Lord. We must also do the good things. On the other hand, some people think that as long as they're doing good things, it doesn't matter the fact that they're doing some things that are wrong. But again, God requires both. We must avoid the evil and do what is good. And of course, there are many, many scriptures that teach that. Any other comments on departing from evil and doing good? Bill.
In Romans 14, 19, therefore let us pursue the things which make for peace and the things by which one may edify another.
Well, that leads us into the last part of verse 14, doesn't it? Seek peace and pursue it. So what are some other comments or scriptures discussion on peace? Other comments on peace on the scriptures for us? What kind of peace should we have to please the Lord? Who should we have peace with? Okay, well, let's, Frank.
Should pursue peace with God, to be at peace with God by following His commandments.
Okay, so first of all, it's peace with God, isn't it? We should attempt to have peace with people, but sometimes people won't allow that. No matter how hard we try, there are sometimes people simply will not be peaceable. But our peace with God is the most important peace. Look in Romans chapter 5 and verse 1, please. Romans chapter 5 and verse 1. Romans chapter 5 and verse 1. If you'd like to read that for us, please. Romans 5, verse 1. Bill, please.
Therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ.
All right, so that's the most important piece, isn't there? Is peace with God through Jesus Christ. And then from that, we should seek peace with other people. Okay? Other comments on seeking peace and pursuing it? Other scriptures? Okay? Romans chapter 12 makes the point that, and it's already been discussed, that sometimes people do harm. We should seek peace by doing good even when they do evil, but sometimes it's not possible. The passage says in verse 18, if it is possible, as much as depends on us, let us live peaceably with all men. So sometimes we're not able to be peaceable, not because we've caused a problem, because people insist on mistreating us, and we'll see more about that as we go through the evening this evening in the Psalms, that sometimes people mistreat God's people, no matter how hard we try to do what's right. Any other comments on seeking peace and pursuing it? What is taught by the fact that he says to pursue it, seek it and pursue it? What do we learn from pursuing peace? Is peace always easy to come by? It's not, is it? He emphasizes that with the term seek it, pursue it. It doesn't just come easy. We have a responsibility to work hard to seek it and to obtain it. Anything else through verse 14? Okay? So verse 15 and really through 17, 18, we have question number 10. How does God treat the righteous as compared to the wicked? In verses 15 through 18, 19. How's God's treatment of the righteous compared to that of the wicked? Karen?
His eyes are open to the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry.
Right, so the righteous, God's eyes are on them, his ears are open to their cry. Verse 17 shows then that when the righteous cry to the Lord, he hears and delivers them. So God basically hears the prayers of those who are good, those who are dedicated to serving God. What about the wicked? How does God treat the wicked then?
The face of the Lord is against them, and in 1 Peter 3:12 it practically repeats this verse.
Okay, so, all right, yes. So,
About his eyes and his ears.
okay.
That's what he does against the evil.
So the face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off their remembrance from the earth. Okay, so we have both God's care for those who are righteous, and listening to their prayers, but his opposition to those who are evil, refusing to bless them. Okay? Other comments on how God treats the righteous as compared to the wicked in 15 through 19. Okay, so I ask you for other passages that talk about the idea of God not hearing the prayers of the wicked, but does hear the prayers of those who are righteous. There's some other scriptures on that. Verse 18 says that God is near those who have a broken heart and saves such who have a contrite spirit. Okay? So God hears the prayers of the righteous and blesses them, but those who are wicked, who do evil, face the Lord is against them. Other passages that teach that? Terry.
In John chapter 9, the man who'd been healed by Jesus from being blind says in 9:31, we know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him.
Okay. And many scriptures that show that those who God hears are those who are faithful. James 5:16, the effective fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Okay? So we have a principle taught a number of times, and we'll see it again in the Psalms, as well as elsewhere, that if we want God to hear our prayers, we have to be obedient. We have to serve Him if we want Him to answer our prayers. Okay, any other comments through verse 18? All right, so then the last part of chapter number 34, question number 11. What happens to the wicked as compared to those who trust God? What's the end result for the wicked compared to the righteous in verses 19 to 22? How does he conclude the treatment God will give to the righteous compared to the wicked? Verses 19 to 22. Karen.
The Lord delivers the righteous out of their afflictions.
All right, the righteous, He delivers them from their afflictions. Okay? Verse 21, what about the evil? What about the wicked? Rick?
Evil shall slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous shall be condemned.
All right, so those who are wicked and those who oppose righteous people will be punished, will be condemned. So verse 22, the Lord redeems the soul of His servants, and none of those who trust in Him will be condemned. So God redeems those who serve Him. He guards them. He will bless them, but the Lord punishes and condemns those who do evil. Okay? So we have a contrast between, in the whole psalm, basically a contrast between those who are righteous and those who are wicked, and how God blesses the righteous but will punish the wicked. We then need to be among those who seek to good days by controlling our speech and doing good rather than evil, and by pursuing peace. Other comments or discussion on the 34th Psalm? Anybody? Okay. Let's move on then to the 35th Psalm, which is another rather long, lengthy psalm, and I don't know if we'll be able to get through it tonight or not. Let's see what we can do. Psalm 35, let's read the first 16 verses. We'd like to read Psalm 35, verses 1 through 16, please. Psalm 35, verses 1 through 16. Who'd like to read that for us, please? Frank, please.
Plead my cause, O Lord, with those who strive with me. Fight against those who fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler, and stand up for my help. Also draw out of the spear and stop those who pursue me. Say to my soul, I am your salvation. Let those be put to shame and brought to dishonor who seek after my life. Let those who turn back and brought to confusion, who plot my hurt, let them be like chaff before the wind, and let the angel of the Lord chase them. Let their way be dark and slippery, and let the angel of the Lord pursue them. For without cause they have hidden their net for me in a pit, which they have dug without cause for my life. Let destruction come upon him unexpectedly, and let his net that he has hidden catch himself. Into that very destruction let him fall. And my soul shall be joyful in the Lord. It shall rejoice in his salvation. All my bones shall say, Lord, who is like you, delivering the poor from him who is too strong for him. Yes, the poor and the needy from him who plunders him. Fierce witnesses rise up. They ask me things that I do not know. They reward me evil for good to the sorrow of my soul. But as for me, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled myself with fasting, and my prayer would return to my own heart. I paced about as though he were my friend or brother. I bowed down heavily as one who mourns for his mother. But in my adversity they rejoiced and gathered together. Attackers gathered against me, and I did not know it. They tore at me and did not cease. With ungodly mockers at feasts, they gnashed at me with their teeth.
Okay. So once again we have a psalm of David, it says in the introduction, in which he's dealing with the problem of people mistreating him. Now I'm not sure what the situation is, but what does anybody have a thought on that? As you studied the psalm, does anybody have a thought about what situation might fit what David is talking about here? Or do you want to describe, in your view, what he's talking about? Steve.
He's calling on God to fight on his behalf.
Okay. So he's got enemies who are mistreating him, and he wants God to help him, not allow those who are opposing him to succeed. Other comments on what you think's about, Rick?
Well, I look at David, and he's trying to be a righteous man. He's trying to do the right things and be righteous. And verses 7 and 8 there says, "For without cause they have hidden their net for me in a pit, which they have dug without cause for my life. Let destruction come upon him unexpectedly, and let his net that he has hidden catch himself. Into that very destruction let him fall." They don't have a reason to attack David.
Okay.
David's not trying to do anything to harm him, but they cannot stand him being a righteous person. They want to do evil.
All right, can you think of situations in David's life that may have fit that situation, that description? Terry?
Well, the way Saul pursued David, once Saul knew that the kingdom had been taken from him and given to David, he began pursuit of David, and it went back and forth. It wasn't a constant thing for a while, but the longer it went on and the more fame that David received, the harder Saul pursued David to destroy him, even setting traps for him.
Okay. And yet this is the treatment that David received from someone that he had cared about, someone he had tried to do good to, and even sought their well-being the very best that he could, which would fit Saul, wouldn't it? Okay. Another possibility might be Absalom, his son, who David certainly had tried to do well, and yet he mistreated David. On the other hand, there seems to me to be at least some thought could refer to Christ and how he had done good and yet his enemies mistreated him. So let's look at the psalm and we'll see some specifics that it says then, okay? So beginning in verse 1, question number 1, what does he request of God? First 3 verses, 1 through 3. What is the request of God in the first few verses? Frank.
He asked God to plead for my cause, O Lord, and fight against those who fight against me. Stand up for my help and stop those who are pursuing me. Say to my soul, I am your salvation.
Okay, so he wants God to take his, recognize his righteousness and defend him. To some extent, it's like a court case. Plead my cause. Defend my case against those who are mistreating me. Okay? Other comments on the first 3 verses? Okay, and then question number 2. What does he want done to his enemies? Verses 4 through 6. If he wants to be defended, what does he want done to his enemies? Verses 4 through 6. Okay.
He wants them to be put to shame, brought to dishonor, and brought to confusion.
All right, put to shame, brought to dishonor, brought to confusion, because they are after my life, he says. And what illustration does he use for it in verse 5? How does he illustrate what would happen to them? Bill.
Let them be like chaff before the wind.
All right, chaff before the wind, which is of no value, which is destroyed or ruined because it's of no value. Let the angel of the Lord chase them. So they'll be rejected. They're that which is not right, and therefore God will not accept them. And verse 6, again, the angel of the Lord is pursuing them, and their way is a dark and slippery way. Okay? So he wants God to defend him, but his enemy is to be rejected because of their sin against him. Okay, other comments to verse 6? And then question number 3, verses 7 through 10. What else did he say about his enemies? Verses 7 through 10. What did he say about them? I discussed it to some extent. How does he describe his enemies and what he wants done to them? Okay, Terry?
Well, he's describing the fact that there's no cause for what they're doing. They've dug a pit. They've hidden a net for my soul. That turn those things back on them, that very things they would be doing to me, bring destruction on them unaware, and let them fall into their own pit and be caught in their own net because they are so deceitful and seeking such evil against him for no cause.
All right, so they're doing these evil things to him. The illustration of it, a pit dug for him to fall into, the idea, and it's without cause, and several of you made this point. Whatever wrong these people are doing to David, he's saying, I haven't done anything to them to harm them. There's no reason for them to be treating me this way, and yet they are. And so they're the ones who should be punished, not me, because of the wrong that they've done. And so they should, verse 8, destruction should come upon them unexpectedly, and they should fall into the net that they themselves have set. Let them fall into themselves, what they have said. Okay? Other comments to verse 8? And then what would David do then in verse 9 and 10? When the enemies are defeated, what would David do? Verses 9 and 10. Karen?
He would be joyful in the Lord and rejoice in God's salvation.
All right, he rejoices. And he praises God who delivers the poor from those who are too strong for him, from the one who plunders him. Okay, so basically David's asking for justice. He said, I haven't done wrong. These people are wronging me. So he's calling for justice upon those who, in this case it was Saul or Absalom or whoever it may be. But again, put it in the New Testament with Jesus. And the same thing applies, you see. Those who oppose Jesus, yes, Jesus gave them opportunity to be forgiven. He died for their salvation, but if they don't accept the salvation, then they're the ones who will be rejected, where Jesus has done nothing wrong and did nothing to be punished and treated the way he was. Okay? Other comments through verse 10. Anybody? Terry?
One of the things that I think is a point here is that David's rejoicing is not over harm coming to them. It's over the salvation that God offers him. He rejoices in God and the salvation that he's brought. So it's not like an evil attitude towards his people who are mistreating him, but a call, like you said, a call for justice.
Okay. So let's look at the next few verses, and I think we'll see that emphasized in the next few verses. Verses 11 and 12, look at those first of all. How are these people treating him in verses 11 and 12? How did they treat him in verses 11 and 12? Karen?
Yeah, we've already talked about it earlier, that they reward him evil for good.
Okay. So whereas in Psalm 34 we were talking about how that we should return good for evil, these people returned evil for good. He was treating them right, and they were false witnesses, and to the sorrow of his soul they returned evil for good. What does it mean about the last part of verse 11? They ask me things I do not know. And some of the translations are a little bit different there. Thoughts on, they ask me about things I do not know in the last part of verse 11? Terry?
I thought it carried the idea they accused him of things he didn't know anything about. He hadn't done it.
I don't know anything about that. Yeah, you accuse me of committing some crime or some evil, and I don't even know anything about it. Not only didn't do it, I don't even know anything about it. That seemed to be my thought as well. And so they bring up false witnesses to accuse him, like they did with Jesus, and like they do it apparently with David as well. Okay? Other comments through 12? How had he treated them when they had problems? You see how they're treating him, causing problems for him when he's done good. But when they had problems, how did he treat them in verses 13 and the following verses? What did he do for them when they had problems? Rick?
He mourned for them. He wore sackcloth when they were sick, which means he was in sorrow for them. And he tried to do what was right for them.
Okay. So these people apparently were people that he knew, who he thought he cared for them and they cared for him. And yet they betrayed him and mistreated him in these ways. People that he wanted, thought he had a good relationship with. That's what it seems like to me, which would fit Saul, at least should be with Saul, because he'd done such good service to Saul, and it certainly would be for Absalom, his son. And if it applies to Jesus, look at the good things he did for people, and yet how they treated him. So these are people he's done good for, and he says when they were sick, he mourned for them, humbled himself, and in verse 14, he acted as though it was his brother, his friend, who was suffering, and yet they treated him in these terrible ways. Okay? Other comments to verse 14? I don't know if any of you have noticed this or not, but Karen and I have commented a number of times how actually this kind of thing happens. Sometimes in the people that we try to help the very most, go out of the way to do the very best that we can to help them, sometimes if those people reject the truth, they're the ones who turn against you the most. Who have the most bitter things to say about you after you've done so much good to try to help them. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but we certainly have experienced that, and it's interesting to me that David describes that here. Okay? So then in verse 15, question number 5, he describes more of what the enemies did. We've just read through 16, so verse 15 and 16, what did the enemies do there? When he was trying to do good for them, what did they do? Verse 15 and 16. Karen?
Well, if he was suffering adversity, then they attacked him.
Okay, so he was sorrowful and concerned for them when they had problems, but when he had problems, they were glad. They rejoiced, it says in his adversity, and they attacked him, used it as an opportunity to tear at him and mock him, verse 16, gnashing him with their teeth. So he tried to do them good when they were suffering, but when he suffered, they just used it as an opportunity to try to hurt him some more. Okay, other comments through verse 16. All right, let's read a few more verses. We have another few minutes here. Let's read 17 through 21. We'd like to read 17 through 21 for us, please. Bill, for 17 through 21.
Lord, how long will you look on? Rescue me from their destructions. My precious life from the lions, I will give you thanks in the great assembly. I will praise you among many people. Let them not rejoice over me who are wrongfully my enemies, nor let them wink with an eye who hates me without a cause. For they do not speak peace, but they devise deceitful matters against the quiet ones in the land. They also opened their mouth wide against me and said, Allah, Allah, our eyes have seen it.
Okay, so we continue as he describes how they'd mistreated him compared to how he tried to treat them. What is his concern about the Lord in verse 17 and 18? What's your request of the Lord? Or speak to the Lord. Verse 17 and 18. Bill?
He's wanting to know how long the Lord's going to look on before he rescues him from destruction.
Right. How long will this continue? This is obviously not right. It's not fair. It's not just. Again, a concept we've seen again and again and again. The people of God, when they suffer, we naturally wonder, how long is it going to continue? How long are we going to have to continue to deal with this problem? And back to the concept of waiting on the Lord, because he deals with things in his way, in his time. So he's, how long will you be till you rescue me? And then I can give you thanks and praise you. Verse 18. Okay? What does he not want to have happen? Rather than rejoicing over victory, what does he not want to have happen in verse 19? What does he hope will not happen? Terry?
That the wicked will win.
Yeah, I don't want the wicked to rejoice. They're wrongfully my enemies. Don't let them wink the eye. They do not speak peace, but they devise deceitful matters, verse 20. And they open their mouth wide against me, verse 21. Said, aha, their eyes have seen it. Our eyes have seen it. Again, this is false accusations. They're saying, aha, we saw such and such, but it wasn't true. They were lying about him, deceitful matters. So you have this contrast between David and how he'd done right versus those who opposed him. And again, I think it could apply with Saul or Absalom, but almost all of it, as far as I can see, would apply to Jesus too. Now, he was mistreated when he came and tried his very best to teach people the truth, and yet they rejected him and ultimately killed him. Questions, comments through verse 21. All right, next time we'll take up in verse 22 and try to finish Psalm 35. We'll deal with 36. We'll try to touch on 37, but obviously we're not going to be able to finish it. So start with verse 22 next time in chapter 35. Thank you.